France are now within touching distance of retaining their title. My name is Mark. Let's talk rugby. I recorded a version of this last night. That is on Monday night. And there was recorded for like 40 odd minutes. And it was only when I was editing it, I realized that there's an intermittent buzz from the microphone on it. And unfortunately, all of that then went to waste. And I didn't have the time to re-record it. So we're recording it tonight instead. It's not going to be the same, obviously, because you can probably tell I just speak. I have a little bit of notes, but mostly it's just speaking off the top of my head and giving my opinions on things and just trying to be honest and, be passionate about my rugby. But we're going to follow the same format. So it's not going to be the same format as we've had for rounds 1 and 2, which, for those, if you haven't seen them, we basically talk a little bit about the games themselves. We talk a lot about statistics and what teams are doing well, what teams are doing not so well, which players are doing well, etc. And then we have a look at the table and talk about, where teams are in their championship, what their goals could be or should be, etc. In this one, it's going to be slightly different in that we are not going to be touching the statistics today. And the reason for that is because we have a fallow week next week. I have some time off next week, so I'm going to do a standalone video on the stats and kind of, take them out of this weekly one, because I want to do maybe a bit of a deeper dive on some of the stats and have a look at trends and things like that. So those are going to be put to the side. So today we're just going to talk about the games and the table and the teams. And as I said, yesterday I went on for 40 odd minutes. I don't know how long it's going to be today. It's probably going to be a bit shorter because there was a lot of subjects that I touched on yesterday that I may not actually bring up in this one, but we'll have to see. But one thing I did bring up yesterday and I do want to bring up today is that I just want to say, however long this video goes on for, I really appreciate you guys spending your time listening to me, going on about rugby. And, it's always kind of really humbles me that people take the time to listen to my videos and take what I'm saying on board, etc. And we have a nice kind of, back and forth in the comments and stuff like that. I really love that. And I really love the fact that people do actually take the time when, it's the age now when you could be doing anything, right? And probably some people think, I was better to do it. I probably just turned off. But for those who have stayed, massive thank you to you. The channel's been going for, what's it now, 3 years, I think we're coming up on 3 seasons at least. I think this is the 3rd. And, it's grown. It's still tiny, and it's never going to be big. It's just the way it is. And I'm fine with that. I'm not here to become big and for this to be a career. I have a job and, it pays my bills and stuff. So I'm happy with that. And I'm happy to have an outlet to talk about rugby about. So this is what it is for me. And if it was one person listening or, we're at whatever, 900 and something subscribers now. So if it's that many listening, it's great either way, that there's at least one person out there who is willing to listen to what I have to say. So I think that's great. There is a little bit of ego, certainly on my side. I think anyone who makes videos will say the same thing. You obviously want, people to be liking your stuff, etc. And it would be nice maybe sometime this year to hit 1,000 subscribers. Like that's kind of, I think the goal for most channels is to try and get at least to 1,000. So we'll see what happens with that. But that's enough prattling on about other stuff. Let's prattle on about rugby instead. So I'm going to pull up the official site here and we'll go through the results from the weekend and the scores and stuff. So let me pull those up. Okay, so the first game of the weekend was England 21, Ireland 42. So as an Irish fan, obviously very happy with that. Didn't expect it. And I'm not going to say I predicted it, because if you look at my prediction, I obviously predicted an England win. I did say that I kind of noticed that our attack was certainly improved against Italy, and you could see that the work that was being put in was beginning to pay off. But there's no way I expected it to be the way it was against England. But I have been one of the people. You can go back through my videos instead of been posting for the last, I think, 3 years or whatever it is. Whenever I talk about Stuart McCluskey, I've been banging a drum about him, and Balakoon as well. And I'm not saying I discovered him or anything, but we did talk about how getting these guys involved in the team just brings a new energy to the team, and we could see that. We saw that at Twickenham, I think, on Saturday. So and that's the thing. Hopefully against Wales, we're going to see maybe a Dogbo and Izuchukwu coming back into the squad, maybe both getting starts and bringing that energy in again. And I think that's really what the Irish squad has needed. It's felt a little stale over the last year. Doesn't mean that just because we had one good performance that suddenly we're going to be world beaters and trashing everybody that's put in front of us. But it does show that there's progress there, and does show that the benefit of bringing in kind of new voices, new energy into a group can really have as well, especially when you're going through tough times. And something also, before we get too much into the game as well, I've been giving the coaches a tough time recently, and I think it was deserved. But now I have to give the coaches huge credit for what they've done with the players, getting them up for this, and not just getting them motivated, but you can see all the work that has been put in there. Now, there's still work to do. Obviously, scrum needs to be fixed, and a few other little areas certainly need to be worked on too. But you got to give them massive credit for what they've done. Nobody was expecting that, but those guys, the players delivered, but the coaches delivered as well. So fair play to them. So let's talk about a little bit more about the game itself. So we're not going to go fully into the game, because any of the games from the weekend, I've got full reviews on the channel. If you want to go check those out, we go in more detail into, what happened when, and what the kind of ebb and flow was of each game, and then some stats on the particular game as well. We won't really be doing any of that. So, this one is more kind of an overall feeling for each of the games. But we will now just quickly run down through the scores for each team. So England scored three tries. That was Dingwall, Lawrence, and then Underhill getting over with 5 minutes to go. George Ford converted all 3 tries. For Ireland then, 5 tries. Gibson Park, Balakoon, Tommy O'Brien, Dan Sheehan, and Jamie Osborne. And then Crowley converted 4 of those 5 tries, and he also put on 3 penalties as well. So let's start with England, and then we'll come on to Ireland, because we've already talked about Ireland and the coaches. So from an England point of view, it's 2 poor performances back to back, 2 defeats back to back. I think this one is certainly worse than the Scotland one, because Scotland was up at Murrayfield, and in the Calcutta Cup, Scotland have generally held sway in recent years. So that was maybe, I think it was less unexpected, as it were, compared to this Ireland one. We knew that Scotland were capable of things like that. And unfortunately for Scotland, a lot of the time it's one-off performances that they put in there. But we know they always get up against England, and they did it in that one. But in this one, I feel like from an England point of view, is that the performance was definitely worse than the one that they put it, that they had in Murrayfield. And part of that, I think, has, again, the same with Ireland. If you're giving credit to the players, you give credit to the coaches. If you're laying criticism at the players, you have to do it for the coaches as well, for, performance that they put in. And I think, the coaches have to own a lot of that too. For me, their inability in that first 20 minutes when they were dominating possession and territory to actually, produce a score was, a major problem. The basic skills handling, under pressure wasn't there. Obviously, you give credit to the Irish defence on that, but still, you think that, at certain times, if basic skills hadn't been executed, England could have actually got, a score or two and had momentum, and maybe that Irish performance doesn't happen after that, because suddenly Ireland are chasing the game, and Ireland are not very good, when they're chasing more than the score behind. They find it very difficult. So we got to take that into consideration. But also you have to look at, the selection, like the balance of the back row. They picked 3 poachers. Generally didn't get near the ball for poaches. Ireland were just too good at generating quick ball and getting that ball away from contact as quickly as they could. And I thought Gibson Park, one of the main things in that is that as soon as that ball was delivered to him, he knew what his options were. He selected the right one pretty much every time, and he gave his passes. And again, they didn't, even when our scrum was, struggling a little bit, like in the build up to that first try, like our scrum was going backwards. But we still managed to get the ball out, get it to width on the right, make the breakdown there, and then ultimately led to, the penalty, the quick tap, and then the score for Gibson Park. So, it's that kind of speed of thought, and also you then give credit to the rest of the team, because he knew what his options were, because there was options there. Whereas against France, a lot of the time there weren't options there. There weren't realistic options there. And therefore, even though we were generating quick ball, it didn't matter, because, we didn't really have good options, players coming onto the ball at pace, and also things like dummy runners, etc. But yeah, England, from their point of view, again, the balance of that back row with the 3 guys in there all looking for poaches. Well, the problem with that is you need someone to, you need kind of a player generally in their back row who's going to actually do the tackling, right? And not just, and when I say that, I don't mean just like obviously tackling the guy that's coming, but what I mean by doing the tackling is someone who is like, that's kind of their speciality, right? That they're going to tackle a player, and they're going to tackle him in such a way that they present that player to the jackler in the best position for the jackler to go for the poach. So they're making sure that they're not going to be in the way of a poach, that they're not going to get pinged, that they're, going for that maybe low chop to make sure that they get them down quickly, that there's no kind of, backpedaling and you're losing momentum trying to get over the ball at the ruck, all of that kind of stuff. Like if you don't have that in your back row, and you're all poachers, well, a non-specialist is then doing the tackling and then maybe not presenting it all that well, and maybe doing the tackling and then trying to get up and go for a poach and give away penalties and stuff like that. So, I felt that was certainly an error. Also, the fact that England did not kick very much at all. They kicked 18 times in the game, compared to 42. And if you listen to kind of the fair weather England rugby fans, the type that maybe only watch, Six Nations and World Cups, and maybe like the November internationals, that don't really watch, much club rugby or anything like that. Those fans have been saying England kicking too much. They need to play more exciting rugby. Well, they didn't kick very much against Ireland at all. but they didn't play much exciting rugby either. And we've talked about it many times on this channel that the teams that play the most exciting rugby like in the last few years are almost always the teams that kick the most. And we're seeing that with France, at the minute. And, they're the most exciting team, certainly in the Northern Hemisphere at the minute. And they kick the leather off the ball. But they do it with purpose. But England weren't doing that. And it got to the point where, because they got so far behind, they knew they'd get crucified if they were kicking the ball away, even though the proper strategy probably was to be kicking and then try and, get a foothold back into the game, but they couldn't do that. And I felt like, there were a lot of kind of misalignment and holes in their attack. You saw Ireland making, more line breaks than we've seen them, by far in the first couple of rounds. Also, England's line out wasn't great either. They had issues around, like Cowan Dickey gets replaced after 20 minutes. They bring George on. Then Freddie Stewart gets a yellow card, goes to the bin, comes back with a couple of minutes to go in the half, and he's substitute before halftime for Marcus Smith as well. And then, Maro Itoje, captain, on his 100 cap, gets taken off on whatever it was, 50 something minutes. So there definitely, were a lot of issues. I think, in terms of leadership, that's why George was brought onto the field, is that, nobody was really getting hold of the team and trying to sort things out. And even though he come on, it still didn't really change for them. And, you look at it again, in attack as well. I certainly thought the Irish defence was improved, but England still issues in attack where, again, simple catch pass where you've got numbers and you can't do it. And then that, they had the same issues that I've been talking about with Ireland for the last year, in that someone would make a break or a half break and then it turns into nothing because there aren't guys busting their ass to be there in support on the shoulder. And that's why I think France are so good. It's yes, they have talented players, but if, say Gaetan or, Bowbury break the line, well, straight away, they've, when they break the line, they've probably got, Biel Barry in support. They've got Dupont in support. Maybe Ramos at the Sogbe. Everyone is flooding through. You got forwards coming up behind them as well. There's always tons of support there, and England had none of that. So even any decent stuff that they produced came to nothing because it doesn't matter if you make a break, if Ireland are busting their ass to get back and covering back, if you don't have any options for offloads or even, clearing out for recycle, you're going to either end up in touch, which they did a lot, or you're going to get jackaled, which happened a lot as well. So lots of issues for England, but at the same time, you have to remember they're still the same team that won 12 tests in a row. But the issue now for me is going to be, I talked about it after the Scotland game, is that the knives would be out for the likes of George Ford and Freddie Stewart at fullback. And we're seeing that now, after this especially. Lots of talk of, Ford shouldn't be the 10. Get rid of Stewart. Once Furbank comes back, everything's going to be fine at fullback again, etc. Put Marcus Smith in at 15 and put Finn Smith at 10 and drop George Ford completely. All this kind of stuff comes out because with the English media and with those kind of fair weather fans, it's all hyperbole, right? It's either they're the best team in the world or the worst team in the world. There's no kind of medium there. Even when they're just an okay team, still this player should be playing because he's tearing up in the Premiership, and if only these 2 or 3 players are in the team, then we'd be beating everybody left, right, and centre, and that's kind of always the way it's been in English rugby. But I know there's lots of level-headed English fans that I've interacted with a lot of them. I've had the pleasure through whether it's on Six Nations videos or November internationals or through the Champions Cup stuff, things like that. I've had the pleasure to interact with lots of them who know their stuff and wouldn't be spouting all of this kind of stuff as well. Like maybe they would make a reasoned argument for maybe making a change of 10, which is fine, because we do the same in Ireland, right? But it's just a hyperbolic thing of should be out of the team, never seen in white again kind of thing, which is the way that a lot of it goes and gets very vitriolic as well. So I have sympathy for those fans, because we were there in Ireland a couple of weeks ago against France. We felt like, for me at least, it was like the ground taken out from under you, and your team that you knew were in a little bit of trouble, suddenly they're in a lot more trouble than you thought. And, as a rugby fan, it's not nice for that to happen. It doesn't matter if you're English, Welsh, Scottish, French, Italian, whatever, in the Six Nations, or Irish, obviously. The emotions are still the same around your team and that kind of stuff. So I do feel for the English fans. On the Irish side of things, like we talked a lot about it already, but for me, again, having those new players in there with that energy coming in, again, the likes of Balakoon, Tommy O'Brien, Jamie Osborne, McCluskey, McCluskey, the effort he put in to run down Marcus Smith just typifies, for everyone to think that is kind of on the edge of the squad. What do you need to do to force your way into the team? Like, don't be feeling sorry for yourself. Put in the work, and when you get your chance, make sure you take it with both hands, because you may not get another one. But we want to see those players being given the chance in the first place. I think that was the issue. Now we're seeing them given the chances and they're doing very well. And we also have to give a lot of credit to Jeremy Loughman as well. 4th choice at loose head. Still, our scrum is not great, but the guy has been out there, he's been performing. And then, O'Toole then had to come on at loose head as well. When the replacements come on, and normally he'd be on the tie head side. So again, you have to give credit to these guys who they know that as soon as Porter is fit, Porter's back into the team. But it doesn't stop them doing their bit, and hopefully doing their bit now gets them the rewards at some point later down the line. And also it should mean that, when it comes to camps and stuff, all these guys should be there. Your Porters, your, Boyle, the younger, Paddy McCarthy, and, but your Lockmans should be there, and O'Toole, etc. And all of those guys should be kept involved in things as well, and not just kind of, thanks for the help out, lads, but now the proper players are back, so you can go back to your province. Hopefully that doesn't happen. I don't think it will, because I hear a lot about how Farrell is a great man manager. So yeah, hopefully they are managed well and rewarded, whatever that means. But certainly kept in the thoughts for the future, and not just a case of, I think we did a bit too much in Ireland, where guy gets injured, somebody covers, does well. The guy who's been there for ages comes back, immediately straight back into the team. Whether it was Furlong Keenan, Henshaw, Bundyaki, whoever, and that's why the likes of McCluskey, the likes of, Tommy O'Brien, Balakoon, Osborne, weren't getting maybe as many chances as they were in the past, but it's good to see now. Also, big credit to Jack Crowley. It wasn't a perfect display, certainly. But at this stage, I think Ireland should just say, right, he's our number 10 now. And whether it's Harry Byrne, Frawley, or Prendergast, they've got to win that shirt off his back, because I think he has been, I'm not going to say done dirty, because that sounds a bit too dramatic, but I would say that it's felt like, if he has an off game, it's very easy for him to be replaced, compared to some other players. So hopefully he gets a run in the team, but hopefully as well that the likes of Prendergast are looked after. We talked about it before, but yeah, overall, lots of positives for Ireland, but it doesn't mean that suddenly they're back. They're at the same level as they were a few years ago. I don't think so, because again, issues like the scrum definitely need to be sorted out. And how good they were in attack, they need to be able to repeat that. But also, what they need to do now is, they maybe caught England a little bit on the hop. Now, 2 weeks, even though it's Wales, but still Wales, and then Scotland the week after, they'll be looking at those tapes. What were Ireland doing in attack? How did we stop it? So it's going to get much more difficult. Can they still produce it in the same way? And the only way they're going to be able to do that is the players being as committed as they were, that always be an option. And kind of don't be surprised. If you never think you're running a dummy line, always think that you're going to get the ball. And they weren't doing that in the first 2 rounds. They were doing it against England. But as I said, it's rugby. Things can change very quickly. England could be up, go to Rome, get a big win. Could also, go to Rome and lose to Italy for the first time as well. But the same for Ireland. Ireland could lose at home to, resurgent Wales. So we never know really in rugby. It's one of the reasons why we love it. But yeah, this one, England 21, Ireland 42 was the final score. So on to the next game then. And that was Wales 23, Scotland 26. So delighted for Wales. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I don't mean I'm delighted that Wales lost. I mean, I'm delighted for Wales and for their fans, because they needed something to look at and go, okay, there is actually light at the end of this tunnel. And I think that's what it was for them. They didn't get the win, but that performance was like light years ahead of anything that they produced so far in the Six Nations and anything that they produced in a long, long time as well. So that's definitely a positive for them. For Scotland, they obviously massively up against England and then come down a little bit to earth against Wales, but they didn't panic and they got the win in the end. And I think that's a measure of some of the strides forward that these players have made in recent years. And for them, it always has been about kind of getting that consistency. They're still not quite there, but you've got to be pleased with the fact that they come out with the win. So in terms of the scoring then, so for Wales, you had Rhys Carré and Josh Adams with the tries. Then Costello converted both of those. He added 2 more penalties and Jared Evans put a penalty up as well. And for Scotland then, you had 4 tries from Steyn, Russell, Darcy Graham and George Turner. With 5 minutes to go, was basically the winner, the winning score for the game, but also the bonus try. And Finn Russell converted 3 of the 4 tries as well. Right. So let's start with Wales. So Wales, through the first couple of rounds, overall performance, not great, but you did have Aaron Wainwright and Lewis Rees-Zammit as standouts. Lewis Rees-Zammit at one point made more meters than anyone else in the tournament. Aaron Wainwright was right up there in terms of carries, but also meters after contact. So it's one thing to carry and then get absolutely destroyed in the tackle and knock back and do it a bunch of times and build up your meters. It's another thing to hit that contact and drive through, and that's what he was able to do. And also, we talked about how Wales were actually generating some of the quickest ball in the first two rounds, but doing absolutely nothing with it. In this one, they did something with it. It still wasn't enough to win the game, but again, it's that kind of green shoots of there's something there. The coaches are actually having an impact on this group, and they're getting them moving forward. We all know as rugby fans, when your team is down in the doldrums, like climbing out of that pit is not just a straight climb. You don't just kind of ninja your way up out of a pit like that. You climb up a bit and then you slip back and then you climb up again. But as long as you're making some kind of progress over the long term, then that's really what Wales want to do. And I think we saw that in this. I thought Alex Mann was very good for them as well. Rhys Carre, he got 2 tries now, and he has that kind of, that ability of a Dan Sheehan or like a Gavin Coombs, where give him the ball 2 or 3 meters out, and more than likely he's going to get the ball down over the line and score for you, even though like other forwards have had 3 or 4 goes at trying to do exactly the same thing and haven't been able to do it. He seems to have that knack. So that's a really good thing to have, I think, close to that line. It can be the difference. It wasn't in this case, but it can be the difference between winning and losing games as well. But for Wales, obviously everyone wants the team to win, but for Wales right now, it's about performance. They put in a performance there. I thought Costello was good at 10, and Costello was another one of these kind of similar to George Ford in that, he can have good games and he'll get kind of mealy-mouthed praise, as it were. He won't be overly praised. And then when he has a poor game, he's another one where he should never have been in the team in the first place. And it's not fair for people like him. But I think he's decent at 10. It doesn't mean that I think he's going to be their 10 necessarily long term, but I think he's certainly an option in there, and he shouldn't, if he has a bad game, he shouldn't just be discarded either. But Wales at the minute, they're trying to kind of find a style that is going to suit that group of players, that can kind of get the best out of them. And then after that, then it's about kind of, tweaking the personnel, because they've had already, I think, the whole, okay, let's cycle through anyone who's sort of available. That happened in November. And now it's a case of, okay, well, here's a core, and it feels like they're getting a core of a team together. And then it's about kind of trimming the edges then to get there. It's a long process. It's not always successful because, for every team that is being successful, there has to be a team that, at least one team that is being unsuccessful. And when you look at the Six Nations, success obviously measures different ways, but, obviously you have a champion, you have a wooden spooner, and then you kind of have the second and third place, which are kind of, depending on where teams are, can be seen as a successful campaign or an okay campaign, but generally never a bad campaign if you're in there somewhere in the top 3. Maybe not the best campaign ever, but certainly not terrible. And then, fourth and fifth are generally teams that, may have been able to do a little bit better, or, sometimes you've also in there got a team that have actually had a decent, from their standards. So we're talking at the minute Wales or Italy, like whoever finished fifth out of them or higher, will have had a good Six Nations. But if they do, then whoever has then finished below them has probably had a poor Six Nations overall. But yeah, I think for Wales, again, it's just something to build on there. They're identifying the players that are probably going to be the core of the team, at least for the next while. It's not necessarily going to be the core of the team that goes to the World Cup, but you have your kind of spine of your team there, and then you build around that. And then later on, maybe next Six Nations, maybe some of that core gets changed and you bring in new players, but you're not kind of, wholesale changes. It's going to be evolution over time for them. I think they've finally hit that stage of their development under Steve Tandy. And again, it's not going to be all kind of straightforward upward trend for them, but wish them well, wish their fans well. Then Scotland, I got a lot of time for Scotland. I make no secret of the fact that Glasgow, one of my favorite non-Irish teams in the URC, because I see a lot of parallels between them and Ireland, really, and the Irish teams as well, in terms of being a smaller nation and not really having too much of a past, like I'm talking about from when I was younger, right? Where as a Leinster fan, we had really good talented players. Thinking about back to the era where we would have had the likes of O'Driscoll and Darcy and stuff in there, Contapomi at 10, Nasewa at 15, etc. And a good smattering of Irish internationals, not as many as we do now, but still couldn't perform in Europe, in the big games, until we finally did. And I kind of feel that's where Glasgow, that same journey Glasgow are on at the minute, they finally performed in Europe this year in the pool stages. Hopefully they perform in the knockout stages as well. But for Ireland as well, that kind of fed into the Ireland team. That's when, around the time, we had Munster going well and Leinster going well, and that then fed into an Ireland team that finally got a second Grand Slam in our history and led to, onto a period that has been really good for us. But it's a period that at some day is going to end, and then we'll be back down, because again, we're not a massive rugby nation. But at the minute, luckily, we're not kind of gone yet. But I feel like that's where Scotland are at the minute. But at the same time, you look back through rugby history, doesn't matter what competition it is, there are always good teams, with exceptionally talented players who, for whatever reason, never quite reached their full potential. And this Scotland side, you look at the talent that's in there, and you think how those guys not only not won a Six Nations, but not kind of finished in the top two. It kind of beggars belief. Yes, there have been other talented teams in there as well, but you think if they were performing if they had a season where everyone performed to their potential week after week, that they would have been up there with a proper shout at lifting a title. But it hasn't happened for them. It could happen this year, because if they beat France and they beat Ireland, potentially they could be champions. It means having basically the 2 weeks of their lives maybe in those final two rounds of the Six Nations. But that's what happens, right? When teams win titles, you don't win titles by just about, most of the time at least, by just about falling over the line. It's exceptional players producing even for them, exceptional performances. That's what France are doing at the minute. And that's why they are clearly the favourites to win. But this Scotland team, there's more potential there than they've certainly delivered. But I think, this win here against Wales, coupled with the win against England, pretty much, for me at least, means Gregor Townsend is going to be the coach through the World Cup. So there's going to be no, Franco Smith until at least after the World Cup. And, you have to think, well, after World Cups, there are generally a number of international coaching positions available. Franco Smith has said he wants to be an international coach. Is there potentially going to be a position that he's more interested in than the Scotland role becoming available? Like, i.e., will Razzie make it 3 World Cups in a row and then decide, well, it's time for me to hang up my coaching hat or wherever, and or maybe just move on to something else from there, and maybe there's a position available there. It's possible, right? But Scotland, in this one, it was about, they fell behind, and, Scotland of maybe going back, say, 4 or 5 years ago, potentially lose that game, but they were able to, do just enough to get the win. And sometimes that's what you have to do as well, right? Is you're not always going to win fancy. You're not always going to, win by a lot. Sometimes you have to deliver, and quality teams more often than not will deliver in that situation. That's what they're able to do. You think about the quick thinking from Finn Russell, with that restart after the penalty over the corner to Darcy Graham, goes in the corner, scores, and suddenly, there's a route back for them into the game. And then being able to as well, the line-out hadn't been going amazingly for them, and, in the game or in the Six Nations, but, they get the line-out right, they get the maul right, the maul goes over, Turner in the pocket, and they scored a crucial score. And then also Finn Russell lands the conversion, which means that now they know that Wales, are desperate for a win. So therefore, putting out those extra 2 over now means that Wales can't go for a drop goal or a penalty to win the game. Obviously, they could draw, but they knew probably Wales would want to actually win the game. So those extra 2 points were important for that. It meant Wales had to score a try. And Scotland, I think, managed the rest of the game pretty well to make sure that didn't happen. But yeah, I think, I said it in the review of the game itself that it's one of the few times in a Six Nations at the end of the game where both teams, I think, take positives from it. And that's going to be good for everyone involved, really. But Wales 23, Scotland 26. Okay, so on to then the final game. And that was France 33, Italy 8. And, I think the scoreline really does Italy a disservice in this one. France kind of blew out a little bit towards the end. But really the difference between the teams was the things that Italy were doing really well in the first 2 rounds didn't go as well as they had. It didn't go as well in this game as they had in the first 2 rounds. Whereas France, the things that they were doing really well did go as well as before. And I think that was the difference between the teams. And we talk about what that is. Well, first of all, let's talk about the scorers, and then we'll talk about that. So for France, 5 tries. So Louis Bielbieri, because he's now the Will Jordan of the Northern Hemisphere, where you put him in a test match, he scores a try. It's just that simple. Then Miafu, Ramos, Dreyan, on his debut as well for him. That was the bonus point try. And then Gaetan with the final try again that put a bit of gloss on the score for them. And then for Italy, you had Capuozzo and a penalty from Garbisi, and also Ramos converted 4 of the 5 French tries. So let's talk about what went well, first of all, for France, the home team. So their ability to, thrive in chaos. We saw that again, with some of the tries, like the, Italy overthrow at a line out where, the scorers are certainly closer than they were at the end. It's on the edge of the French 22. It's a decent chance for them to attack, but they overthrow. Biel Barry sticks out a leg at the ball, kicks it into the path of Gaetan, who breaks, goes around the side of Lina. Lina does really well to get back at him and tackle him, but then there's an offload to Ramos, and Ramos does extremely well to get over to score. And that was a massive momentum shift, I think, in the game. So, that ability for France for, people are saying, the bounce of the ball has gone their way, but a lot of the time, the reason why it goes away is, it's not just coincidence. It's because they've worked at it. And I don't mean like they worked to make the ball bounce a certain way or whatever. What I mean is you look at any contestables in the air at the minute, and France are basically there. They know if there's a slap back coming, they flood the area. Players execute their skills really well. They get that ball, they shift it, and we're seeing that a lot from them. And we saw it in this game as well, is that ability to get to all the scraps. And it's not happening by accident or by the bounce of the ball favoring them. It's the fact that, it's a case of if you freeze frame it and the ball is bouncing, well, if the ball bounces, let's say the way that it did, well, there's a French guy there to catch it. But if it had bounced in a different direction, like let's say 90 degrees a different way, well, there's a French guy there that could have caught it. If it had bounced like left instead of right, there was a French guy there who could have got it. And that's why all the bounce of the balls, I think, going their way, is because the guys are working their ass off to get into position to be there just in case the bounce of the ball goes their way. Whereas other teams aren't able to do that, because it's, it takes a lot of fitness and a lot of practice to do it. And that's what they're kind of, really good at is again, existing in that chaos. And we saw that there. Also, their ability, once they get in behind a team, it's almost inevitably going to be a score. Whereas when teams get in behind them, which we saw, Italy do, they got Capuozzo, through, and then get swarmed, by players covering back. And it's that heart, that, determination to get back, the kind of Stuart McCluskey moments. France are producing them as well, but we don't see them, we don't recognize them maybe as much because, they're maybe not as pivotal in the game, because France go and do something, crazy skillful and score anyway, like up the other end. So it's maybe not as highlighted, but they are doing that. They're scrambling well, they're defending well. So all the things that they've been doing well, they're, clinical. Ramos off the tee, brilliant. The fact that Ramos, Jalabert, he's out injured, no problem. Stick Ramos in at 10. Put Atasogbe at fullback and bring Drian onto the wing. And, it worked out well for them. Other than, the Capuozzo try where Ramos, basically caused that and put Atasogbe in a really difficult position. But yeah, overall, just again, all of those good things happening for them. And the fact as well that, then we look at Italy, for Italy, the things that were working out really well for them was, first of all, the scrum, best scrum in the Six Nations. I think they still were the better scrum on the day, but they did not have it all their own way. And the decision to put, Miafu and Flamand into the second row to beef it up really helped France. And it meant that even though you could see, when the teams engaged, that Italy were kind of winning the hit, right, at the start. But they weren't getting the dominance that they were against Ireland and against Scotland, and therefore there was a bit more of a contest, and sometimes they would be the ones going down. They get penalised, and one of their big weapons wasn't as big as a weapon as it was anymore. And then the other thing was another set piece, like their line-out was going pretty well, but also the defensive line-out, they were stealing far more opposition throws than any other team in the first 2 rounds. Didn't steal a single one against France, and they missed 6 out of 16 of their own throws as well. So that platform completely taken away from them. Then also, they were able to find some holes in that French defense and get through, but they nowhere near as clinical as the French. The French scrambled well, and they couldn't get the guys there and support for the person making the break, or if there was somebody in support, there were still 2 or 3 other French guys there, to make that tackle, to get over, get the poach, that kind of thing as well. So, but I think overall it was a good performance by them, and I think it was the toughest game that France had been given by any of the 3 teams that they faced so far in the first, the opening 3 rounds. I think they did much better than either Ireland or Wales at posing questions to France that those other teams couldn't. Still, as I said, France, at the moment just feel like they're on another level. I don't really care what the world rankings say, but for me, they're definitely the best team in the northern hemisphere. I don't think many people are going to argue about that. But just their ability at the moment to work their way through situations and through games, and things that feel very even, at a time where, maybe there's contests going one way or the other, but suddenly, in a flash, they produce something and they've scored, and suddenly the whole balance is tipped. And they've done that so many times. And that, again, that does not happen by accident. That's a lot of, work by the players and the coaches, to make sure that, they've obviously noticed certain things, because you can see with them that, their ability around the high ball now, where they're not worried about, other teams are still at that stage where trying to win the ball cleanly, set up a ruck and go from there. France are not thinking that. France are thinking, get up there, contest with the ball. It's probably not going to be clean. It's going to break. Whether it breaks on their side or our side, we have to be there to the ball first. And for the most part, they are. And when you have that kind of mindset, it means it doesn't matter who gets the touch on the ball, whether it's you or the opposition, because everyone else is just thinking about getting to the ball. They're not thinking about, oh, well, he's going to go up and he's going to slap it back to us and then we're going to do whatever. They're just, get to the ball first and then just act on instinct. And their instincts are so good that it normally leads to a break or a try from there. And then also the fact that, the way they're kicking as well, they're varying their kicks. They're kicking longer than a lot of other teams. And, they can do that because of the pace that they have available to them as well. You can send a kick a lot longer if you got somebody like BL Barry chasing after it, compared to a lot of other wingers in the competition. So, it gives them it gives them that ability to put pressure on further up the field as well. But also, it's not just that, it's about variation in kicks as well. Going for 50-22s, turning the opposition, not necessarily kicking to win the ball all the time. You're kicking over the top, you're turning them over, you're isolating them, you're almost encouraging them to try and run the ball back, and then forcing a mistake, getting a scrum, getting a turnover, getting a score. And that's they're so much better than anyone else at that at the minute. It's just being able to adapt on the field, and compared to any other team in the Northern Hemisphere, it feels like the light years ahead. But at this stage, another brilliant win for them. It's another bonus point. But again, I think, Italy can certainly take some positives out of it, but there are obviously negatives. They definitely have to fix their line out now. They've got to work on that against England, because that will be one area where England will be looking at that. Obviously, England looking for a response after the Ireland game, and they'll be looking at, okay, well, let's really have a go at them in the line out, because they were very shaky against France. Maybe that's going to be somewhere where we're going to get some change. But you still feel that, again, compared to recent years, Italy certainly have reached another level. It's about now maintaining that, and also moving, kind of also trending upwards for them as well. So let's see if that happens. But yeah, it was France 33, Italy 8 in that one. Now, let's have a look at the table. So we have France there at the top, 3 wins out of 3. They have the full 15 points, so 5 points, so bonus point win in every single game. And it means that, yeah, they're basically, within touching distance of retaining that title. If they beat Scotland, it's pretty much guaranteed, because, Ireland at the moment can get to, maximum 19 points. And then if Scotland lose to France, then Scotland, even if they got let's say 2 losing bonus points from that game, the maximum they could get to would be 18, because we're on 13 after losing to France. And then if they beat Ireland with a bonus point, they would only go to 18. So it'd mean that, France would pretty much have the title retained as long as they beat Scotland. Now, mathematically, they wouldn't have retained the title, because Ireland could still match them on 19 points if they don't get a bonus point. But you look at that points difference, and you think, like, Ireland are not making that up in 2 games. Even if Ireland, like hockey, let's say Wales and Scotland, well, you've got to think, like, if France have gotten to 19 points in the first place, it means they've beaten Scotland, which means that points difference that they have is going to increase even more. So yeah, for me, the only scenario where Ireland or Scotland win the title is Scotland beating France, and then France losing to England, because basically France have 2 bites at the cherry now, right? If they beat Scotland, pretty much guaranteed to retain the title, and the same against England. They beat England, pretty much guaranteed to retain the title because of the points difference. If they get even, let's say they lost against Scotland, they get a losing bonus point. Well, if they beat England, then mathematically can't be caught, because they're going to be on at least 20 points. And again, the maximum that Ireland can get would be 19. Scotland, let's say they beat them, they go up to, let's say, 15 or even 16 points. Well, then Scotland then have to, get a bonus point win against Ireland, probably to, to stay level with France, even having beaten them. But then again, they've got probably to hammer Ireland as well, like by a massive score, to reverse that points difference. So I think you can pretty much safely say at this stage, unless France completely implode, that they should be retaining their title. So, but that is something that can be a little bit of a worry, because they can start then thinking about, okay, well, we're going to retain the title, so now we have to push on for the Grand Slam, but they've still got 2 games to win, and Grand Slam really should only be thought about, obviously it's going to be in people's heads, but not spoken about. But really only when you get to the last game, when it is still a possibility. So, but for me, yeah, I think France almost certainly going to retain their title at this point. Then we got Scotland in second place. So 2 wins out of the 3. And at this stage now, you would think if they can win one of those last 2 games against either France or Ireland, then it's going to be, what started out as looked like a very poor campaign for them, as one of their best Six Nations campaigns, because it almost certainly means they're going to finish, certainly in the top 3 and maybe in the top 2 in the tournament. So that would certainly be, a step forward for them, and it would be, you think that now if Scotland, beat France in 2 weeks' time, then there'll be kind of a lot of what might have been talk, I think, of, if only we hadn't lost to Italy in the first round, then we'd be going over to Dublin, potentially, looking for a Grand Slam. And I think that kind of thing is dangerous as well, because, there's part of it, you look at it and you think, well, if they'd beaten Italy, would that performance against England have come? Maybe England would have beaten Scotland in that game. So you can't just go, for me, you can't just go back and change one thing and not expect it to have knock-on impact for other things. Because a lot of that fire that Scotland had, obviously England as the opposition helps, but a lot of that fire comes from that loss against Italy, right? And the same for Ireland. Ireland hurting again, after being embarrassed by France in the opening round, not really performing against Italy. They really wanted to put in a performance, and that's where that England performance came from. So if Ireland had beaten France, let's say first up, it doesn't complete follow on that performance happens against England, because the conditions for it to happen maybe aren't there. But yeah, you got Scotland there in second, and Ireland in third, so 2 wins for them as well. Yeah, at the minute, I think for Ireland, finish anywhere in the top 3, they finish second in the tournament. I think let's say Ireland were able to finish second, and they finished second, and they've suddenly brought in a kind of half dozen or more players who are genuine options in the first team. That's a massive step forward, and also with that, a number of players who can be in your 23, and you're not going to worry about them. It's not going to be a case of the way it's been for many World Cups for Ireland, where you get to the knockout stages, and the player in a certain position who's always been in that position over the last 3 or 4 years is injured, they're out, and the guy who would come off the bench is out as well, and suddenly somebody's going in with no real, they've got a few caps, but they've no real experience of proper tournament play. Maybe they've been on summer tours, when Lions are out or something like that, but haven't really been given the exposure and been examined at that level. It should mean that as long as they can continue and keep those players there, it's going to be, again, I think another win. So Ireland finish on at least 3 wins, and they've brought those players through. I think it's going to be certainly a much better Six Nations than most people would have thought. Then 4th place, we have England, 1 win from their 3 games. And you have to say, for England at the minute, it's whatever happens, it's not going to be the Six Nations that they wanted to have, that they were expecting to have. And I don't mean that in England being arrogant kind of way. I mean that in the same way that me as an Ireland fan expected England to be one of the top two teams in this tournament. Like, everything was pointing to that 12-game winning streak. One of the form teams in the November series, and yeah, it looked like they were coming in with all the momentum behind them, and it was between them and France for the title. It hasn't worked out for them in that way, but again, that can happen to any team. So for England now, it's really about how do you finish this tournament now. They could go to Italy, lose to Italy for the first time, and then go to France and be kind of almost the guests of honor at the French Grand Slam party, and not really play a role in that, and end up potentially even with a wooden spoon if things really go against them. So for them, it's really about how do you finish this tournament. You've got to get some pride back, get back to what was working well for you, and build yourselves back up again. And that obviously starts in 2 weeks' time in Rome, but at the moment they're in fourth. Then fifth place we have Italy, 1 win for them as well. That opening game against Scotland, and they're on the same number of points as England, both on 5 points. And yeah, they'll be looking at this now thinking, this is a real chance for us. Let's not let it slip by. But unfortunately, Italy in recent years, when they've been in that position, they have let it slip. So let's see if they, it feels like Italy are a different proposition this year compared to other years. But I think the test of that will be what happens against England. Not necessarily that they beat them or not, but if England go to Rome and beat Italy well, then you have to start thinking about, well, are Italy really the proposition that we thought they were? Have they made as much progress as we thought? So I think that's a massive game for them in 2 weeks' time because of that. And it kind of, it's a bit of a parallel, I think, towards, if you look at Zebre this season. So Zebre started the season in the URC, won the first 2 games, after having, been bottom of the table, bottom of the table for a number of years in the URC, but showing, that they could cause the odd upset. But then the start of this season, they come out of the blocks with 2 wins, but then slowly sank back down to the bottom. I think now they're on like a 10-game losing streak or something like that, in the URC. So, Italy, if they had like their good performance, their only good performance, their only good result, because it was a good performance against Ireland, certainly. And I don't think it was a bad performance against France, honestly. But their only good result, let's say, was against Scotland. And then they're slipping down for the rest of the tournament. They end up losing to England, and then in the final round losing to Wales. Then, it completely changes the narrative, I think, around their season. So for them as well, it's a massive 2 weeks to finish, and it feels like pretty much for every team, sometimes in the Six Nations, you get to a point where you've got 2 teams potentially, a lot of the times 2 teams look like they're heading on kind of the whole Grand Slam decider thing, and then the rest is just about scrambling for positions and avoiding the wooden spoon. But it feels like for every team now, just because of the way things are set up, that there's actually a lot more for those teams that are kind of in the middle as well, for them to sort out. And the same for Wales. Wales, they're at the bottom. No wins from the 3 games. They got the 1 point, obviously that losing bonus point that they got against Scotland. And for them, we talk about it's about performance, but they would absolutely love a result. So, they've got 2 games left. they'd love to go to Dublin and upset Ireland. I've seen them do it before. I've been in the stadium when they've done it to us before. That was a few years ago, mind. But, I said before, Wales are one of the, compared to the non-superpowers of the Six Nations, because I think, France and England are kind of the superpowers in that if we go, and I'm talking about like historically, not just Six Nations, if you go back, they're the teams that can all generally always produce a strong team and be thereabouts for the title. Whereas I think the rest of us can float between, we're brilliant, we're winning championships, and we're getting wooden spoons. We float in between there. So I'd consider Scotland, Ireland, Italy, and Wales kind of the non-superpowers, even though Ireland have had a really good, successful period recently. Wales have had a massively successful period as well. Tons of Grand Slams, etc. So I'm not saying that we can't be strong teams in the Six Nations. I just think that we're not historically at that level to be able to be almost always somewhere up near the top three. But Wales, I think, of those four teams, are the team that are more elastic in terms of bouncing back. That you can see Wales going from wooden spoon, and I think they've done it before, wooden spoon to Grand Slam champions, but potentially then to wooden spoon again. That's kind of how they can be. And because of that, I could potentially see Wales actually surprising maybe Ireland, possibly not winning, but I think a victory is not out of the question, I think, in Dublin. So it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. Ireland coming down off that massive performance in England, they're not going to be at the same level. They're not going to be able to get to the same level, I don't think. So, let's see how that goes there. Ireland are going to have to be far more methodical in the way, if they're going to win that game, the way they go about it. So there are definitely opportunities for Wales if they can get some momentum early on in the game. And then obviously to have that final game. If they don't beat Ireland, they have that final shot against Italy as well, where potentially the wooden spoon is going to be decided. But that's our table. That's my thoughts on it. And again, just a massive thank you to all of you for sitting through this, listening to me ramble on, as it were, and just share my thoughts as they come to me here about things. But as I said, next week I have some time off, so we'll do a bit of a stats dive on things, and I'll have that video up. And at the weekend, we've got the URC is coming back for a round, so we'll cover that as much as we can as well. And then obviously 2 weeks time, then we have the fourth round of this competition. So lots of exciting rugby ahead. If you've been around on the channel, for a minute, for ages or wherever, and you're not subscribed, maybe if you wouldn't mind, just hit that subscribe thing or share or do all those things that YouTube likes, that actually gets my videos out. I'd massively appreciate that. But I'll talk to you guys again soon.